G'day and welcome to another episode of Built by Dan and yet another instalment in my GT40 kit build series. No surprises what today's episode's about. I've got a Graziano Transaxle, some engine accessories and my crate engine that I revealed a couple of episodes ago. I'm going to unbox everything, run through what all the different components are that I've purchased so far, what I've still got yet to come, and start to work through what the installation process is in my mind to get all of this bolted up together and test fitted into the engine bay. Okay, let's start with the most important one, the heart and soul of the GT40. Ford Performance crate engine. This is a Gen 3 Coyote. It is the manual package. The model number from Ford is M-6007-M50C. So let's get started, remove this box and let's have a good look at the engine. Okay, so this is how it all comes packaged from Ford. I have already removed a couple of bolts that hold this timber structure in place. So the next step is to lift this structure up off that main pallet structure. Would definitely be easier with another set of hands. Worth buying a case of beers and inviting a couple of mates around. Okay, so now it's all just wrapped in this big blue plastic bag. Just grab a knife and cut that off. And there it is. I'll grab the camera off the tripod and we'll have a quick look around. All right, so here we go. This is a freshly opened Gen 3 Coyote crate engine. Already spotting a few things that I'm going to have to look into in terms of the install. May as well point them out as I go. One is this oil filter and the cooler that's on there. It sort of sticks out, it's quite obnoxious. I'm not sure how that's going to go fitting into the GT40 engine bay. Couple of components that I'm still waiting on is an alternator and air conditioning kit for this motor. So they're still on back order, as well as the main control pack, so the main wiring harness that plugs into this engine harness that's just attached here. I find it quite odd, and I've never been able to work out why, the crate engines come with an exhaust header on one side but not the other. I'm not sure if anyone can enlighten me in the comments as to why that may be. One other thing, the intake manifold will need to be flipped around. Obviously the throttle body and intake is here at the front. This engine is positioned as it would sit in the car, and with the rear firewall running up in front of the engine there's not going to be any room for that intake. So I want to be able to flip that intake around and have the main air intake at the rear of the car. Along with that, the engine is obviously all wired to go in a car so that this is the front of the engine. It will still be the front of the engine, but it's not going to be as accessible as it would be in, say, a Mustang, which is what the engine's designed for, or built for mainly. So there'd be a fair bit of work in redoing the engine wiring loom so that it's actually reversed so that it works with the GT40 layout. Not sure if I want to go to that sort of trouble right from the get-go, or if it's something that I'll worry about in the future. I do still want to do an 8-stack injection on this, but it won't be right now. For now, I just need to keep a stock engine with stock emissions compliance so that I can get the car engineered and registered on the road without too many hassles and without any expensive emissions testing. I'm going to have to remove the flywheel and that starter ring gear there. it's not going to fit inside the adapter plate for the Graziano transaxle. So if I flip around here to the transaxle, this is the adapter plate. I've just temporarily mounted it to the transaxle. This space inside here is not going to be anywhere near large enough for that starter ring gear. So I will need a setup off a Lamborghini or an Audi R8 to suit this transaxle. Other than that, there's probably not too much more to point out. I do have a few accessories which I'll get to unboxing shortly, but in terms of the engine, I think that's about it. If there's anything else that anyone's particularly interested in, drop me a comment and I'll try and include some more details or some more footage in a future episode. Okay, so I'll move along now to the Graziano. Now I've obviously unboxed this in a much earlier episode. This actually turned up before my GT40 kit arrived. Just quickly here, I have the custom engine mounts from the manufacturer, some polyurethane bushes to go in there. I don't yet have the bolts to be able to mount that up. I was provided with Windsor mounting bolts. They're an imperial bolt rather than a metric bolt for the Coyote engine. Over here, like I said earlier, I've got the adapter plate bolted up to the transaxle just to get a bit of an idea. I have just sort of craned it up over the chassis so that we can see what's going on and what might be involved to try and get all of that to fit. There is another set of polyurethane bushes here to mount the adapter plate here to the chassis. So there'll be a left and right mount for the engine, a left and right mount for the adapter plate, and then there is also a left and right mount for the rear of the transaxle. So here I've just mocked up one side. I've bolted the bracket to the transaxle, and there obviously need to be these polyurethane bushes installed. But this other part of the bracket then sits here and bolts to the chassis. I'll jump across to the chassis and just show you how that actually works. So in terms of the transaxle adapter plate, it bolts up to these 2 points on the chassis. I'll just zoom out a bit so that you can actually see where I'm referring to. And it does sit on the front side of those mounting points. So coming back from there, we then have the transaxle extending past the shocks. I'll just go and grab this mount. And just on the side here, where we have the lower control arm bracket bolts, we'll actually just have to remove them and install these rear transaxle mounts. Now, just by me even struggling to hold that in position up against those bolts gives you a fair idea of how much this transaxle is actually going to stick out beyond the end of the chassis here. So again, that's the mounting point, and there's still a fair bit of transaxle here, which means this plate is going to be in the way. Now this plate can't just be removed. It's pretty integral to the overall structure of the vehicle. It's actually used to mount and allow the rear clip to pivot just off these bolts here. So I have been provided with an additional brace that will have to mount in here, and I'm going to have to cut a considerable amount of material out of this rear plate in order for the transaxle to fit. Not quite what I was expecting. I was told that the transaxle would fit in this chassis. It may, but not without significant further modification to what was provided from the factory. So that's that for the engine bay. I'm going to have to remove these rear supports. They were fitted at the factory and I just haven't done anything with them. I will have to remove them because the width of the Coyote is going to cause us some issues. It's going to hit those supports when I try and lower the engine in. I haven't decided yet whether I remove that roof spider and potentially even just that rear access panel. It may just provide a little bit more room to sort of wriggle that engine in there if it can sort of protrude a little bit into the cab whilst it's being moved into position. So that's about it for, I suppose, the main components. Now I've got a number of other packages there, parts that I've ordered that some of them I haven't even opened yet and had a look at myself. So I'll set the camera up on the tripod and we'll get to opening them and showing you what I've purchased and why I've purchased them. Okay, so now to unbox some of these accessories. First one's pretty boring. It's just a 20mm plug or bung for the oil pan. In here I have the new oil pickup for the oil pan, including the accessory kit. Bit of a spoiler as to what's coming, but no doubt the box will give it away for many of you anyway. So I have a new windage tray to go between the engine and, well, the engine block and the oil pan, I should say. And with all of those oil pan accessories, it should be no surprise that this is a low profile oil pan for the Gen 3 Coyote. So reason being, the stock oil pan on the Gen 3 is quite deep and it'll probably drag along the ground when it's installed in the GT40. The engine does sit quite low and obviously not a lot of ground clearance. So this oil pan is designed to carry the same capacity but is a slightly different shape. It obviously comes out wider here to increase the capacity rather than just being the same width and being a lot deeper. So the oil pan, the windage tray and the new pickup are all specific to the Gen 3 Coyote. It is different to the other generations of the Coyote. So that's why I have purchased that. Basically need a low profile oil pan to be able to run this engine, or pretty much any engine really. They all require a low profile oil pan, irrespective of which engine you're going with. And lastly, I have already opened this one because there was a little bit of water damage on the bottom of the box. So I have a new intake manifold. Why, when I've got a brand new engine that comes with its own intake manifold? Well, this is actually a Gen 1 Coyote intake manifold. From a lot of the research that I've been doing online, whilst it is slightly different, it doesn't have some of the modern additions for the, I think it's CMCV, controlling the valves to improve energy efficiency and the like at idle. This particular intake manifold is suitable for being able to mount the intake 180 degrees from factory, which is what I need to achieve to get the intake to the rear of the engine rather than being at the front. So that's going to be a fun task because we really are getting into the territory where I have no idea what I'm doing with this sort of mechanical work. I'll have a look to see if I can find some tutorials on how to do this sort of stuff. I don't anticipate that it's going to be overly complicated. It's just that I've never done it before. If I can't find enough support I may well look to see if I can call on a mechanic mate to come and give me a hand to swap some of these components around. Now again, not sure that I necessarily need to go and install this right now. I could probably test fit the engine with the stock intake because I don't need to have an actual airbox or filter or anything attached to the intake at this point in time. So they're all the components that I've got. As I mentioned, there's still a couple of things to come, and in order to be able to install this, I need to sort out some bolts. I've gone through all my bolt kits. I'm still having issues with incorrect bolts or insufficient bolts being supplied in the kit for this stage of the build. Now I know I may sound like a tight ass, but at the end of the day, I paid a lot of money for this kit. I was told it was complete. It had everything I needed to be able to assemble the car, and it simply doesn't. If I hadn't have spent so much money on it, I'd just go to the hardware store and buy the missing bolts. So I'll see how I go contacting the manufacturer to try and get those missing components. If I'm going to have to wait too long for them, I probably will just go and buy them. But yeah, so next steps will be to start removing some of those additional accessories off the engine that I don't need. So the exhaust header, the flywheel and starter ring gear. Like I said, I may actually need to remove the oil filter and find a lower profile setup. And I definitely need to replace the oil pan with a low profile setup. Again, because the car's elevated off the ground, I may be able to at least do a test fit with the stock oil pan, but it needs to be done regardless. So I may as well just get the oil pan done and potentially have a look at whether I do the intake manifold or leave that for a later date. In terms of the Graziano Transaxle, that's pretty much good to go. I will have to remove the support bars in the engine bay and that rear panel that supports the rear clip for an initial test fit. Until I can get everything mounted up, I don't know what or how much I need to cut of that rear support. So not too keen to start sort of cutting that up until I know where I stand with that. I do need some more bolts for the transaxle mounts because I need to replace the bolts for the lower control arm brackets. There's barely a thread sticking through the nylock nut as it is. So by the time I add another, I don't know, 5 mil, what's that, maybe a 1/4 inch plate onto it to support the rear of the transaxle, I'm going to need another 1/2 inch on that bolt. So I'll have to pull that out, see what length it is and what length I actually need to get. So yeah, it's I've spent a fair bit of time running through this one just before sitting down to do this episode. Was a bit disappointed when I found that there were so many bolts that weren't available that I need. But we'll get there. I'll take another week or so to try and pull together all the different pieces that I need, start having a look at removing excess components off the engine and see where I get to in terms of bolting the adapter plate and transaxle up to the engine and trying to get a test fit happening. So that may mean that I just need to go and buy some bolts to mount the engine mounts to the engine. For the time being, I need to press all of the polyurethane bushes into the mounts for both the adapter plate, the transaxle mounts and the engine mounts, and see how we go for a test fit. So that's it for today's episode. If you're enjoying this build series, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every subscription helps, every view helps, every comment helps, every like helps. I do appreciate the comments that I get on all these episodes. I do try to read them all and acknowledge them all, even if it is just to like the comment. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you've got any comments or suggestions. Like I said, I don't really know what I'm doing at this point, especially when it comes to the engine and the transaxle. So things might slow down a little bit while I try and get my head around what I need to do. If you do have any advice or can point me in the direction of where to go to get some good ideas or other YouTube videos that might help me with that process, I'd be more than happy for you to do that, and I'll definitely check them out. Till next episode, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye. Got a quick little update here. Just yesterday after I finished filming, I actually stopped and had a look at the parts that I'd unboxed. Wasn't really paying attention when I pulled it out of the box. I knew what I expected, but this is not the low profile oil pan that I was expecting. This is pretty much just a straight aftermarket replacement, same depth as the original. So having a quick look, the part number here is 20571. It's supposed to be 20570. So I don't know if I stuffed up when I ordered this oil pan, or if I ordered the correct one and they've sent me the wrong pan. So I need to go back through my receipts. It's been a little while since I've purchased that, and see what I actually ordered. Regardless, I'm going to have to order the correct oil pan, so I'll get that sorted and hopefully it doesn't take too long to get here.